Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Bishop. I am the co-chair of the Education and Training Committee of the National Task Group on Intellectual Disabilities and Dementia Practices. This is the first in our COVID-19 dementia and ID. It's the second series. It's the first in our series of 5. My co-chair, Catherine Piers, won't be with us tonight. Hopefully I can get the recording, which I have on that right now, started correctly. And it's my pleasure tonight to welcome all of you and to introduce you to Dr. Rick Rader. The National Task Group has opened this up. Most of you know me, are affiliated regional trainers. However, there are a few of you who are on that have joined from the general public, and we welcome you here as well. All of these 5 sessions will be recorded and will be available to you each a couple of days after the webinar has been held. I also am pleased to announce that 80% of the registration funds for those people who have come on from the general public will be donated to the ARC COVID-19 Disability Response Fund. And we have more information on that on our website, and we'll be happy to answer questions on that, and are pleased to be in partnership to try to help the organizations and the caregivers. Tonight, Dr. Rick Rader is going to talk about what's wrong with my best friend, explaining to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, witnessing it with family and friends. Dr. Rader is a member of the steering committee of the National Task Force on Intellectual Disabilities and Dementia Practices. He is board certified by the American Academy of Developmental Medicine. And at this point, I'm really pleased and honored to turn this over to Dr. Rick Rader.
Great, thank you. I want to first thank Catherine Piers, Kathy Bishop, and their colleagues for their ongoing efforts to make the NTG the most significant, influential, and respected resource for information, training, and advocacy in the arena of intellectual disabilities and related dementias. The NTG's training programs, which I have personally experienced, and their advocacy for families has emerged as the #1 center for this highly specialized area of growing need. I originally named this presentation, "What's Wrong with My Best Friend?" and it worked for me. And then we received a referral. The we I'm referring to is the Orange Grove Center for Aging, Dementia, and Longevity in Chattanooga, Tennessee. To the best of our knowledge, it is the only dedicated center for ID dementia that is part of a community provider agency. We provide training, research, counseling, and direct care to direct support professionals, families, healthcare providers, first responders, undergraduate and graduate students, case managers, and policymakers in the area of dementia and ID. The referral included a quote from Mabel, a 39-year-old woman with Down syndrome living with a family that included her father, a 72-year-old individual in the later stages of Alzheimer's disease. The quote was, "Why the papa not know me no more?" And it was all we needed to know. The quote demonstrates the confusion, frustration, fear, anxiety, uncertainty, and helplessness of not only individuals with intellectual disabilities trying to understand the complexities of dementia, but in reality for the rest of us. Those same emotions ring true. The confusion, frustration, fear, anxiety, uncertainty, and helplessness confound us all. And we're the ones who are supposed to understand the disease complex. Sometimes an explanation, no matter how sensible it appears, does little to mitigate the emotions. And that is lesson #1 before we even begin. For many of us, we believe that educating individuals with IDDD about dementia was not only the missing link, but possibly the last frontier in creating a comprehensive and collaborative program in addressing the myriad problems and challenges that the duality of ID and dementia presented to us. But by no means does this presentation assume, pretend, or imply that we have figured it out, crossed it off the list, and are moving on. This is a work in progress, and we are not only open to hear about your own experiences in this endeavor, but to learn from your ongoing suggestions, concerns, and those areas you might have identified that we have not yet explored. Until Alzheimer's and related dementias are effectively diagnosed, treated, prevented, or cured, we will always have the obligation to ensure that the bystanders are considered and included and supported with the same degree, sensitivity, and respect that we afford to those known as the patients. How do you explain mathematics without an understanding of numbers? How do you explain singing without an understanding of music? And how do you explain Alzheimer's disease and related dementias without an understanding of memory? And while the memory or the loss of memory is not the only manifestation of dementia, it is certainly the single most cited, most referred to, and most associated with the disease. We conducted focus groups with the individuals with IDDD to get a reading on how they were impacted, affected by, and thought about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. All of the individuals had family members, housemates, friends, or parents in the throes of dementia. The number one characteristic we heard was, quote, "That's where they don't know you anymore," end quote. They lost their minds there, or they can't remember. It was evident that they associated memory loss as the main feature of the disease. It is also the symptom that is responsible for making Alzheimer's disease the most feared disease to the American public, overtaking cancer. Memory and the ability to make them, store them, and retrieve them is one of the human characteristics that make us human. Antonio Porchin observed, "One lives in the hope of becoming a memory." We have all been aware of the increasing prevalence of Alzheimer's disease and intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's put strains on the caregivers, the families, the system, and the individuals with the burden of the disease, and what I call the bystanders, the friends, housemates, workmates, and companions with IDDD, but without the disease. The analogy is like dropping a stone in a pond and watching the ripples respond from the disruption. For decades, we have advocated for the total inclusion of people with IDDD. In a sense, this is fortunately or unfortunately what has happened. We now see, anticipate, and expect to see the bystanders being included in the disease process. They start out as observers, to the extent possible, go through the stages of processing the news, understanding the changes, inserting themselves in the disease quotation, move on to fearing the disease, understanding the inevitability of it, and very often assume the role of the supporter and caregiver, and eventually that of the grieving survivor. We say fortunately or unfortunately because unfortunately it's a hard journey, hard to experience, and hard to know how to react. But fortunately because it represents a humanistic milestone that states that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities need and deserve authentic companionship, meaningful relationships, and more connections with other people. With those natural affiliations comes the risk of responding and reacting to loss, grief, and acceptance. So it provides the individual with IDDD the opportunity to taste life, both its sweetness and its sorrow. When we embarked on this project, we did what good researchers do. We went to the literature. We found two potential camps for information. The first was the many books to explain dementia to neurotypical children. Typically, these try to explain dementia using the aberrant behavior exhibited by the children's grandparents diagnosed with dementia. While this provided some good points to ponder, we found that these books were geared towards children who had a higher degree of understanding than individuals that we encounter with IDDD, our target learners. Examples of why we felt this way would not be the ones we would use, was based on the findings of the Alzheimer's Association regarding children's receptivity to the disease. Very young children may need reminding why the person with dementia sometimes behaves in an unusual way. Young people may need to talk about their feelings as changes occur. These feelings may include grief and sadness at what is happening to someone they love, anxiety about what will happen to the person in the future, fear, irritation, or embarrassment. For example, an unusual behavior in front of other people. Boredom, for example, while repeatedly hearing the person with dementia repeat the same stories and questions. Guilt for feeling some of these emotions. Confusion about role reversal, having to be responsible for someone who used to be responsible for them. A feeling of loss if their relative doesn't seem to be the same person that they were, or because it isn't possible to communicate with them in the same way anymore. A sense of uselessness or rejection because of an inability to help the person to, quote, cope or get better. Anger or rejection if other family members are under pressure and seem to have less time for them than they had before. In our experience, these feelings and emotions were far more sophisticated than those experienced and expressed by our bystanders. The second camp came out of explaining dementia to individuals of IDDD, the more accurate target group for the goals of this program. The monograph that has become the classic in this arena is What is Dementia?, written by Diana Kerr and Malines from the Scottish Down Syndrome Association. We were impressed by the simple illustrations, explanations, and especially how the bystander could help. So this is something that you should have in your toolkit. While both of these avenues contain valuable content and descriptions of the behavioral changes inherent in dementia, I wanted something more interactive. It's one thing to describe memory loss as one of the key changes in dementia. It's another thing to be convinced that the person, the learner, fully understands what that means. It's not enough for the learner with IDDD to nod their heads when you describe someone not being able to remember your name, or where they went yesterday, or how to remember how to brush their teeth. We needed to be convinced that the learner understands something like a memory before you can proceed to discuss what it's like to lose this thing we call memory. And beyond that, how can you help someone who can't remember the things you think they should be able to remember? What's the difference, you might ask, between losing your memory and losing your wallet? You obviously have to know the difference between a wallet and memory. So we needed to be convinced that this simple understanding was part of the learning skills. So the core component of this program is to allow the learner to foster the self-confidence to have a working knowledge of memory. From memory, we move to the other variants in dementia, including behaviors, emotions, decision-making, time references, disfamiliarity, sensory disruptions, and all the health impairments that go with it. Beyond ensuring that our IDDD learners understand the dynamics of the disease process, we need to provide a context for that understanding. We need to escort our IDDD learners to a place where they can understand, feel, and express empathy, support, tolerance, and inclusion, all the things that the disability rights movement has been advocating for the past 70 years. To see individuals with IDDD become compassionate caregivers, advocates, and supporters of each other is our mission and our goal. Let me share with you some of the descriptive content of our curriculum. In learning about dementia, we explain how it affects everyone eventually. Sooner or later, you will have dementia or know or care for someone who does. You will be or know someone whose life is changed by this nasty condition. While training support staff and families, we came to realize that everyone includes people with intellectual disabilities. Some of the people we support will eventually develop Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Many more of them will have parents or housemates or friends who are affected. They do not understand why the other person is changing. They are confused by repetitive questions or different behavior. They are afraid that they will, quote, catch it, or that they caused it. People with intellectual disabilities are definitely among the everyone who needs to be educated about dementia as it affects more and more people. Our curriculum has identified 6 things that we discuss. 1, what is memory? 2, what does our brains do? 3, what is dementia? Is it the same as Alzheimer's? 4, what happens when people have dementia? 5, how can I help a person with dementia? And 6, who can I go to for help? In our concept of memory, this is a basic concept we need to make sure people understand before talking about how dementia might affect someone's memory. Here's what we do. We show the participant 2 pictures, one of a slice of pizza and one of a hamburger. And then we say, what are these? Most will know and respond with the correct answers. Then ask, how do you know? This should prompt a discussion of shape and taste, or maybe just because it is. Discuss how they are alike and different. Pizza is usually round, but if it is square, is it still a pizza? Hamburger buns are round, but does not make them the same as pizza. Then we go on to show them 2 more pictures, one of a shirt and one of pants. Ask, what are these? And then you pause for answers. How do you know that? This will prompt a discussion similar to the ones about food items. After talking a while, someone may finally say, I remember what they are, or a similar statement. You respond, great, you are using your memory. If one utters the magic phrase, give it to them. Say, when you were young, someone, a teacher or your parents, told you what these things are, and you remembered them. You are using your memory. Memory helps us learn and remember all the things we know. Here is an opportunity to give them a glimpse of what it might be like to have problems with your memory. Propose to them. If you want to eat something that tastes like bread, tomatoes, and cheese, would you prefer a pizza or a hamburger? They will promptly say, I want a pizza. And if they gave you a hamburger instead, how would that make you feel? They might say, I wouldn't like that because I wanted pizza. But if you could not remember the difference between what a pizza was and what a hamburger was, you might get what you didn't want. And that would not only make you feel bad, but you would wonder how could you not remember the difference between the pizza and the hamburger. You might also get angry at the person who gave you the meal that you didn't want. In fact, if this happened a lot, you may not even want to talk to that person. It might be so unpleasant that you decided you didn't want to eat anything rather than get what you didn't want, and to be made to feel stupid for not being able to remember the difference between a pizza and a hamburger. The same confusion trial is then initiated with the clothing choices. If you wanted to wear something around your legs, would you want shirts or pants? They might certainly say, I would want pants. And you would say, that's correct. But then you could challenge them by saying, how would you feel if they gave you a shirt instead of the pants? And they would conclude that that would be bad because it's not what I wanted. But what if you forgot the difference between a shirt and pants, and you asked for something that you thought was right, but it was wrong? Depending on the responses you are getting, and of course it's all individual, you could escalate their confusion and anxiety. But of course that's not the point. The point is to demonstrate how it feels if you forgot things, and as a result, you didn't get what you wanted or needed. This is an important area because not being able to remember things is okay until there is a roadblock caused by forgetting, like confusion, anxiety, anger, rage, aggression, or self-imposed isolation. Just about 5 years ago, we conducted the first workshop on dementia for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I refer to it as the first workshop since I have not been able to find any similar workshop conducted before that. Needless to say, it was our first workshop. We selected 3 individuals, Leanne, Martin, and Janice, to be our first students. I wanted to share with you some of the information that we provided to them regarding what our brains do. What is dementia? What is Alzheimer's disease? What happens when people have dementia? And how can I help? This last component, how can I help, is very significant. It not only demonstrates that people with dementia need help, but friends and families of people with dementia can help. It provides our individuals with a new role, new opportunities, that of a caregiver, a supporter, and a sympathizer. It is well known that caregivers receive physical and emotional health benefits. It brings them closer into the circle and eliminates the feeling of unworthiness, helplessness, and isolation. It reminds them that we are all part of a system, a family that stays together and does the best job they can to help each other. So providing them the option to be a caregiver in whatever capacity that translates out to be, we are reinforcing to them that you will never be alone, regardless of what happens to your memory, your health, and your life. What do our brains do? Well, here's Leanne. Our brains help us to do everything. It helps us remember what we learn. It helps us think. We use our brain all day, and even when we sleep, our brains let us dream. Sometimes as people get older, they may have a problem called dementia. Dementia is often caused by a brain illness called Alzheimer's, but it may also be caused by other things. When a person has dementia, their doctors will ask lots of questions and may do lots of tests to see what is causing the dementia. This is so they will know how to best help the person. What is dementia? Is it the same as Alzheimer's? Dementia is a condition where the brain is not working the way it usually does. Dementia is often caused by a disease called Alzheimer's. Many people use the word dementia and Alzheimer's to mean the disease, no matter what caused it. Dementia can be caused by other illnesses, and only the doctor can tell for sure. All kinds of dementia make the person's brain not work as well as it used to. Here's a picture, 3 pictures of Leanne with my colleague, Patty Wade. Basically, trying to explain.
Rick?
Yeah?
Kathy, sorry to interrupt. I've got a few people who have said that their volume is a little low. Can you turn the volume up on your computer?
I'll try.
A little bit better, maybe speak in a little closer. Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want them to miss your presentation. Got it?
Working on it.
Down at the very bottom, there should be a logo for speakers. Just turn it up to 100% if you can.
How's this? Is this any better?
Much better. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here's a picture, 3 pictures of Leanne and my colleague Patty Wade basically trying to explain to her through the use of those photographs exactly what it is that she is experiencing living in a home with her oldest girlfriend who now has signs of dementia. So we tell her that dementia is a condition where the brain is not working the way it usually does. Dementia is often caused by a disease called Alzheimer's, and basically, no matter what has caused it, it is the same to the person experiencing it. Even though it is caused by a disease, dementia is not contagious, which means that you cannot catch it from anyone else. An important point to emphasize to our folks. Here's another one of Leanne, myself, and Patty Wade using the expressions and the examples of the foods to demonstrate to her how does it feel if what you're asking for is not what you meant. So what happens when people have dementia? People who have dementia may forget things or get mixed up more often than usual. They may start to act different than before. They might ask or say the same things over and over because they do not remember what they just said. The person may be sad or may not want to do things that they used to enjoy. They might sleep more during the day or be awake late at night. They may cry or may be confused.
I asked him to fix it and he fixed it on his end of it.
Here's Martin, and basically Martin wants to know, how can I help? Most of all, we try to be calm and patient when you are with them. You might want to look at photo albums or magazines with the person. You can listen to music with them. Music calms some people, but Martin, be sure to choose the kind of music that they like. Some people with dementia will do things slower. Be patient and wait for them. Do not ask them to hurry. If the person feels mixed up, stay calm and do not argue with them. Remind other people to stay calm. Learning about dementia is a good way to help. You will understand better and can help other family members or friends to understand. The individual with Martin was one of my family practice medical residents that spent a week with us learning about dementia in our population. Martin was told that the person with dementia might even forget your name someday, but they still know you and know that you care about them. Lastly, here's Janice. When you have a friend or family member with dementia, it can sometimes be scary and frustrating. Even though we can help them some of the time, we cannot cure the problems. She had to learn that sometimes you may be sad that the person you care about has changed. You can also talk to people you trust about your feelings. This might be other family members, a favorite staff person, a friend, someone at church, or your doctor. It is natural to worry, and talking about your feelings can help. You can also talk to Patty Wade, Dr. Rader, or Amy Jo, the 3 trainers that we have here at Orange Grove. If you have questions about Alzheimer's or dementia, they are available to talk to you. We can help answer your questions, and you can tell other family members or friends that they can talk to us if you need help explaining dementia. The most important thing to remember is that dementia is not your fault, and it is not the other person's fault. Doctors cannot cure dementia yet, but we can all help each other if we all care. Another interactive activity that has proven to be popular and reinforcing is the color of the brain model. There are several line drawings of the brain that you can download for free from the internet. These make for great coloring exercises. Depending on the student's abilities and realm of understanding, you can use the line drawings to show what parts of the brain are needed to do the things we need the brain to do. Things like speaking, seeing, hearing, playing, moving, remembering, counting, working, sleeping, and even showing people how much we care about them. The second drawing is used to allow the student to color the brain pink or whatever color they want to show what a good, strong, healthy brain looks like. The third drawing is used to show what happens to the brain when it becomes sick or develops a disease, and how the parts of the brain that we need to do the things we need to do become unable to work the way they should or the way they have worked in the past. You can have them darken those areas of the brain they choose by using dark crayons, markings, or pencils. Depending upon what areas they color, you can describe to them what would happen to the brain if those areas were hurt or harmed by dementia. This was an exercise done by Robin, a woman with Williams syndrome, who was a bystander to her housemate for 18 years. The housemate was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. Again, not for everyone, but an exercise that can be useful for those who are visual image-based learners. The selection of individuals with IDDD for dementia education is imperative. It is imperative that the IDD learners are carefully selected. The main caveat is that they should have a level of language and cognitive understanding that allows them to benefit from the education. Their emotional intelligence may be of a level that the behavior of the individual with dementia, either family member or friend, concerns them, but they may not be able to grasp the concept that explains the manifestation. This insight or criteria for selection should be left up to the individual who has a strong understanding and familiarity of the individual. For example, a direct support professional, a family member, a counselor, or a teacher. The purpose of the education is to remove any figments of the imagination as to what is happening. As for all of us, without a clear understanding of any phenomenon, we invite our imaginations to fill in the gaps. For our individuals with IDDD living with a housemate with dementia, the default explanation is that, quote, the bystander must have done something to the companion to have caused this strange behavioral change. Our ability to provide a context as to what is happening can be very welcome. Many bystanders blame themselves for the behavior. This can result in shame, regrets, and self-condemnation. Thus, one of the main goals of explaining dementia is to relieve them of blaming themselves for the strange and confusing behavior of the person with dementia. Suggestions for conducting the dementia classes. One of the most frequently asked questions regarding the structure of the class is, which works best, one-on-one or the class model? And of course, the answer is always, it depends. It depends on the comfort level of the individual students, the interpersonal dynamics, and the pace of the class. It also depends on the emotional fragility of the students. It depends on the speed that the individual students understand the material and also the depth of their understanding. The advantage of one-on-one education is that the pace can be geared to the individual students. If the sessions become too emotional, one-on-one can spare the person from being embarrassed. The attraction of the classroom is that all the students can be supported of an individual who is emotionally labile. There is also the benefit of interaction, consensus, reassurance, inclusion, and connection. Be aware that no one person is a static individual and that they may benefit from one-to-one one week and may benefit from being in a class another week. That is part of the art and science of being a caregiver, teacher, counselor, educator, clinician, and partner. And of course, it is also depending upon the ongoing relationship over time with the adult learner with IDDD. Often the optimum model comes from trial and error. Speaking of memory, so what do our folks remember about what they learned about memory and dementia? Knowledge is power is reason enough to impart knowledge to individuals with IDDD, but that knowledge is only powerful when it can be recalled, remembered, and employed. So the question of how long can people with IDD remember what they have learned about dementia? If their grasp of the contents about why their best friends or parents are starting to behave and act, including ignoring them, is foreign to them, then it is like an empty toolbox. When you need the tools, they are missing and the job doesn't get done. Our first group of students received their training in 2015, almost 5 years ago. We can say that to all of those students who received the training, all of them have been able to self-report their continuing understanding of the classes. Those who are no longer able to recall material pertinent to the curriculum have themselves entered into the early stages of dementia, and thus they are unable to recall most things that they were exposed to relating to formal training and education. Those who have received the training and are witnessing close friends and relatives entering the stages of Alzheimer's disease have not reported any disturbances relating to the acceptance of observing their families or friends' deterioration due to dementia. Our experience has left us with the following pearls. Selection of the IDDD learners is of critical importance. 2 pearls to impart are vital. The behavior and changes that they are observing are not their fault, and 2, they should not be afraid that they will also get dementia. If they do develop dementia, their staff, friends, and families will help them forever. It's important for them to also walk away knowing that we will never forget those we loved who passed on as a result of dementia. And of course, we all have an opportunity to care for our friends and families who may not even remember us. In parting, encourage individuals to take every opportunity to enjoy themselves, explore things, express your feelings, and ask for help when you need it. Do not think that dementia education is a one and done event. It should be an ongoing program and should change as the needs, concerns, and questions evolve. Very, very often the questions will basically be in line with the progress of the disease state. We should also remember too to counsel, support, and recognize the needs of our support staff. They have created significant relationships with the individuals, and they should be encouraged to grieve. If anybody has any questions, I'm certainly available, and I could be reached through the NTG. Thank you very much.
Rick, thank you. I have some questions for you.
Okay.
The first is dementia hereditary?
So I guess the absolute medical answer to that is it's no. It certainly appears in families. So basically we say that you have a higher percentage and a higher prevalence of developing dementia of some form if another member of your family, but it's not hereditary, it's not familial, and it's not genetic.
Yeah, some of the thought process today is that there may be a predisposition with some toxin or some trigger in the person's life, illness, something that triggers that predisposition.
Right. We're finding out that most deteriorating diseases basically do have a complement of environment, genetics, and the throw of the dice.
Next question. Should we be engaging in this type of training even when there is no resident in the home or families that have dementia?
Well, I certainly would think that my first string of students should be those who are currently affected by it. Yeah, there are certain other lessons that we can learn from educating people about dementia, especially as our population ages and we fall prone to more of the diseases of aging. Certainly teaching consideration, compassion, empathy, those are all tools and ingredients that people need to know and people need to process and need to display as they and their friends and families get older. So yes, there is certainly some significance in cross-pollinating the information.
Yeah, and they added to that is, would it be helpful or scary to them?
Well, let's just look at it this way. Certainly the concept of the disease is very, very scary. In fact, as I said earlier, it is the #1 most feared disease, overtaking cancer. One of the problems is that one of the things that distinguish and solidify and magnify a human is the collective memories that they have of their lives. And once you are stripped of that, that becomes very, very scary. And one of the purposes of our educational program is to make that less scary. And the way you do that is basically by reassuring the individuals that despite whatever will happen, they will be surrounded by supporters and people that care about them no matter what, and that they will go through this together.
I've often had discussions in classes with those that believe that families and caregivers should be told immediately about the stages and what to expect at the end. And I'm one of the others, as well as there are others that say, no, we should be helping people along through the stages rather than kind of forecasting and scaring that all is hopeless from the beginning. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword. I certainly understand the necessity and the wisdom of preparing people for what would come. If you understand not only the type of dementia that you're dealing with, basically the stages are, you can better prepare transition. You know, for instance, up until a point, I think it's perfectly appropriate for someone to age in place. But if their behavior and their disease outclasses the skills of the caregivers, then maybe you have to start thinking about a transition to a memory center in which the staff is better prepared for that. The problem with that, it's like everything, it's timing. You don't want to make that transfer too fast and you don't want to make it too slow. So that's a problem. But other than that, the wisdom of knowing what stage the person is in, you know, a lot of our folks basically get stale in one particular stage. We actually have seen regressions from one stage to the other. And so there's no timeline. And so the last thing you want to do is to provide somebody with guidelines that say he's doing this, he must be in that. We try to get away from the labels, and certainly about early, middle, and late stage dementia. So probably my vote would go with you, that basically just care for the individual in the progression and the trajectory of the disease for that individual.
Right. Using this model, what would you suggest to try to explain COVID-19 to adults with IDD?
That's a very good question, and my colleague, I believe next week, Patty Wade, will actually address that entirely. I think, you know, a lot of this material is transferable to the pathology, and I think the same concept is you have to know who to carefully select to give this explanation to, because this education and training is supposed to alleviate anxiety, and it's supposed to alleviate concern and aggression and fear and depression. You don't want it to be inappropriately delivered to somebody who doesn't have the receptivity to understand it, in which case you're basically just accelerating the anxiety, etc. But if you first establish the fact that, you know, certain things happen in our life, you know, and that they're not always for the best. For instance, we can eat food that was intended to be good, but it might have bacteria and it hurts you. And basically there are things in nature and things surrounding us that basically are intending to harm us. And this particular, you know, agent now, this virus, is one of the many, many things that we encounter in our lives. And again, the same take-home message is that not everybody will get this. And if you do get this, you know, you have a staff and you have a family and you have a support system that will see you through it. And likewise, if one of your friends comes down with it or a family member, you have an opportunity to take care of them and to support them. So there is some positivity at the end of the aisle.
A comment from one of our participants. It was extremely helpful for our family to know what might be in our future. When new behaviors occurred, we were not confused as to why.
Well, yes. I mean, preparation and anticipation in the proper dosages are always effective to mitigate anxiety, concern, confusion, and I dare say panic. But again, it's the methodology in which you basically provide that anticipation. There's also, you know, some words that if you anticipate something and it never happens, you've given that person some unnecessary anxiety and apprehension. So all of these things basically have to be taken on an individual case, realizing the skills of the presenter and the receptivity of the learner.
Right. And just, I know there has been background noise. I don't know, I've gone through and muted everyone I could. Sometimes there are people who are on that don't show up on the screen. So if there anyone besides Rick and myself who are not muted, please do mute yourself. Another question. I'm a parent of a 34-year-old who had a teammate who died of Alzheimer's. The mother could not care for her daughter at the end. This scared me as a parent to know that the behavior in the end is sometimes really difficult to manage. This course was helpful and calming for me. It gave me tools.
That's music to our ears.
Right. Next, from Frank. Even if you don't go into the details of what might be in store, you can work to make sure they have the skills, understanding that will help them to better understand when the next piece of information, the next stage, needs to be discussed.
Amen. And to all of these things, I would suggest that we look to the model of building blocks. So any building blocks, you start with a solid foundation and add to that. But everything must be based on that understanding, and the principles in that understanding of that foundation is, again, this is not your fault. You didn't cause this. Don't anticipate thinking that you're going to get this, and always realize that you're going to be surrounded by people, no matter what the circumstances are, who will take care of you to the best of everyone's ability.
Right. Rick, a lot of people online are not familiar with Orange Grove and your services beyond what you've talked about tonight. Would you talk about your services and how you support organizations and caregivers.
Sure. Orange Grove was started in 1953 by parents. And if you look at the history of the disability rights movement, it always comes down to parents. Parents who at the time were told by physicians if they had a child born with a birth defect, send the kid to the institution. Well, an aggressive group of parents in Chattanooga, Tennessee said that's not an option for us. And they formed the school. And at first, the design was only a school because that was the longevity of the students. They didn't live much past the early 20s, etc. And they formed the school, and after that, everything grew organically. They said, well, now that the students have graduated, now what? So they created an employment service. And then, of course, they said, well, who's going to take care of this population when we're gone? So organically, we grew a residential program. And likewise, everything was added on to that: medical, dental, physical therapy, sports, recreation, leisure, research. We currently have undergraduate and graduate students in 14 different disciplines from about 11 universities and colleges that come here for semesters to learn whether or not it's nursing, dentistry, medicine, social work, physical therapy, etc. We basically do have, as I said earlier, as far as we know, the only agency affiliated center dedicated to aging, dementia, and longevity. And we participate in grants, and basically we are funded by our development officer, etc. We currently support about 800 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We are a day program with a supportive residential program. So nobody lives here, you know, we're a day habilitation program. And we have national prominence, and we have lots of affiliations, including the NTG, the American Academy of Developmental Medicine and Dentistry, the American Association for Health and Disability, the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, and other related groups. And we collaborate a lot on a lot of research projects, mostly involving the aging process, the potential for end-of-life care planning. We have a staff of about 900 individuals as well.
Great, thank you. Who's ever doing dishes or setting the table, you're the one that's unmuted. So if you please could mute yourself. Can you talk about, given COVID-19, some of the challenges you're facing providing services, some of the things you're hearing from especially direct support, because I know that's one of your particular areas of advocacy.
Yeah, well, of course, immediately when COVID-19, the pandemic came and it impacted into our world, we had to cease daytime community-based activities. And basically everybody had to hibernate at home. Well, the difficulty of that is it's one thing to understand the rationale, the reason, and the attributes of staying confined. It's another thing when you're confined, but you don't understand it. And basically, even though our individuals did not understand about COVID-19, the majority of them, you know, they are intuitive, insightful people, and they know when their world has turned upside down. They basically had struggled with the idea of why can't they go to the library? Why can't they go to the park? Why can't they go to their restaurants? And why can't they go to see their friends? And so the other difficulty is, you know, a lot of our individuals rely on positive behavioral support programs. Those behavioral support plans need to be fortified and reinforced almost on a daily basis. And not all our staff are trained on the nuances of providing those behavioral supports. So we started to see an increase in aggression, an increase in adverse behavior, changes in appetite, the typical things you would see in anybody who has basically experienced a transition to what they thought of is a lesser level of life. In addition to that, we had one of our group homes that has 8 women living in it. 5 of them proved positive for COVID-19, and 2 staff members. And basically what we had to do was the active house became our positive COVID residence, in which all the people that had been positive, including 2 staff members, were living there. The other people, and that's about 15 other people when you start doing the tracings, basically had to occupy a wait and see wellness area at our daycare center as well. This puts a tremendous burden on our staff, not only because they have families and lives of their own, and basically now they're being taken out of the picture, but basically these are the people that know those individuals the best. And now we had to substitute for DSPs that were not familiar with those individuals. And it's one thing basically not to know somebody well, but to escort them on a Saturday afternoon picnic. It's another thing not to know somebody well and basically try to create an engaging atmosphere for them at home. So it's been very, very, very disruptive. And especially for those folks who enjoyed employment, that they enjoy being trained. Our training program is ongoing. And basically when we have a lapse of 8 to 12 weeks, the regression of the skills and the enthusiasm takes a hit. So we are basically doing everything we can within the confines and resources of providing a whole system of pleasure and training and excitement in a closed home, but it's very, very difficult. And like everybody, we're looking forward to whatever the next phase of normal is. But basically, at the end of the day, I have to give credit not only to the perseverance and the imagination and the commitment to DSPs, but also to the understanding that basically they have been shown by the individuals that they support. And also our families. You know, a lot of our individuals that live in our group homes enjoy the weekends when they go home to their families. And now that has been taken from them. And basically, yeah, we have family members come by and wave through the windows, but it's not the same thing. Anybody who has worked with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities knows for the most part how much they enjoy human contact. Hugs, high fives, handshakes, etc. And now when you have to curtail that and withhold that with the inability to explain this is for their benefit, well, you can understand basically the behavioral changes that we're experiencing.
And are you seeing a lot more behavioral changes, losses in functioning? And if so, what kinds of resources are you turning to?
Well, what we're doing is we're actually not seeing as much as we had thought. And so we're very, very pleased with that. We do have a very, very viable and a very, very fortified behavioral support program. And our behavioral analysts and our behavioral specialists are doing a bona fide job of contacting the group homes, trying to learn about what's going on and fortifying the DSPs with makeshift behavioral changes for them, which is basically acute response, not a chronic response. So what we're trying to do is to chronicle all of these behavioral changes in the context of what's going on, see what things are changing, what things are working. So it's actually a research project as it is a supporting project. And we hope to be able to understand better what the impact is on hibernation for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It also is very trying for our staff when we are understaffed because people are basically being put in positions to help in our understaffed scenario. They very often have to work 2 and 3 shifts themselves, which could be quite tiring and exhausting and puts an extra burden on their physical health as well.
And hopefully you're documenting all this in your research.
Absolutely.
I'm afraid we may be with this for a little while.
Well, yeah, and we are actually using telehealth and telebehavioral mechanisms, and that could put a whole new light on the way we practice behavioral health in the future as well.
A question from Katie. Are there different tools for someone who has lived with intellectual cognitive disabilities?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Different tools in terms of?
I think in supporting people with dementia.
Yeah, and in supporting people with dementia. Yeah, the tools basically are within the hands of our direct care staff. They're the ones that have to come up with imaginative, innovative, very often on-the-spot tools to basically address drastic changes, unanticipated changes, changes that were anticipated but basically are a higher level than we had thought, etc. We as leaders at the agency, we are obligated to provide the tools for our direct care staff, support them in their ongoing efforts, and appreciate and receive their feedback. We need to know what works in the real life world, not some esoteric academician orientation to what people have said should work. So we have a direct connection with our DSPs, and we are very, very often compelled to change the curriculum, the impact, and the emphasis of what we are training.
Great. It's also, I do believe this is one of the gifts of people who go into the field of care for people with IDD or for family members, is there's a gift of being creative and really knowing the person and supporting the person no matter what the challenges are.
Absolutely. We see that every single day, and I'm just blown away, amazed, and continue to be impressed by their creativity, their innovation, and their ability to create things with very, very limited resources. You know, one of our individuals was reluctant to go outside, even though he had been inside for several weeks, and one of my staff members encouraged him. He said, let's go out and look for killer bees. And another one said, let's go out and look for out-of-state license plates. And while basically you and I would shoulder shrug that, to the individuals that heard that, that was very, very intriguing to them, and it basically got them to go outside and go for a much-needed walk down the street.
Comment from Lucy. With respect to COVID-19, I've created a weekly newsletter for clients that addresses one issue a week. For example, one week I wrote about why can't I go out to eat. I'm sorry. Another week was what's up with all those masks. The client seemed to enjoy having staff read these newsletters to them. Of course, there are also lots of pictures.
Sure.
Sounds great, Lucy.
Yeah. Anytime you can involve the individuals in participating in their own self-care, like allowing them to make their own masks, etc., or basically having each other oversee their hand washing and counting, and whether or not it's repeating happy birthday twice, which is the equivalent of 20 seconds. The more they participate in their own self-care, things like oral health care, you know, our folks can no longer go to the dentist for routine oral health care. And basically that has historically been a low point in their health status. So we are concentrating on making sure that they're getting good oral health care now to prevent them from having an oral emergency. And you sometimes can do that with a competition. And it all boils down to knowing the individual. Yes, explaining to them to the best of your ability of why they can't go outside and why they can't hug and why they can't shake hands, you know, that basically, you know, could contribute to a feeling of not feeling helpless.
I had a question the other night in the family support group of how to help people not feel anxious that staff are wearing something over their clothing, they're wearing masks and look different. And the suggestion I made was that make sure that the staff stands back from a distance and shows putting on the mask so they actually see that that's the person behind. There was also something on the news the other night of a doctor, I think in Massachusetts, I could be wrong in the state, who actually has helped them create masks that replicate the person's face. So when they put the mask on, it's still the face you're seeing of the person, which I thought was brilliant because they were concerned about the depersonalization that was happening for those people in hospitals that can't can't have family members and can't even see the faces of the person to know who it is. So thought that was brilliant.
That is one of my more creative DSPs basically has a chart in one of the group homes, and from time to time they will ask the individuals what it is that they miss the most, what is it that they want to do once things get back to normal, and basically what else would they like to do that they have never done. And that's not to tease them and basically make them feel bad. It's basically to reinforce the fact that the things that they have enjoyed doing in the past will be available to them in some form or another in the future. So it gives them something to look forward to, and it gives them the ability to elaborate on trying to do things that they thought they would like to do but have never had the opportunity. So to keep that spirit of normalcy alive and to basically use it as a carrot, and hopefully to use it as a carrot for them to maintain appropriate behavior that will allow them to get through this.
Katie has said thank you. Question, what do you see in the future for maybe positives coming out of COVID-19? We have to desperately look for them. So.
Well, yeah, I wish I had the magic answer. I know that one thing is going to happen. It's going to change the way we provide primary health care, at least for our individuals with IDDD. We're probably going to be using more telehealth. We're probably going to be using more teleconsults and more telecompassion. And basically, it's probably going to be a way that we can see more people more often than we are now. Now, that's never going to substitute for the doctor-patient relationship or the nurse practitioner or the PA relationship, but it could probably help us to collect data and basically avoid people going to the OR and avoid people going to the ER and basically avoid rehospitalizations. And certainly we're looking forward to doing that as well. It also will be a way in which we can provide more ongoing support for our staff, especially what we're learning now in terms of providing the staff with the mechanisms and the control techniques to preserve and to continue and to maintain positive behavioral supports. We're starting to learn that a lot of that can be done by observing their interaction with our individuals. And of course, it's basically, I think, hopefully, the take-home message is we need to recognize and support and celebrate the skills and the professionalism of the direct support professionals. You know, we always say that, you know, it's the firemen that are the real heroes because they run into a building that's burning. Well, our folks run into group homes where people are confined to stay where they are. And so I think that they will emerge as the real heroes, at least in our field.
Yeah, sometimes an unrecognized heroes, especially right now when little attention is being paid to IDD and dementia, or IDD in general. Mary Ann has written, a video came across my desk, which was a basic understanding of the pandemic. People wearing masks can be scary. I can see if I can find it and send it to NTG for their review. Give me a few days to locate it. Please do, and Mary Ann, feel free to send it to bisber1@earthlink.net. That's my email. If you have any problems finding it, just go on the website and my email is there. Send it to me or to Catherine Pierce, my colleague.
And that's a point that I want to bring up. You know, very, very often individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities may not understand, you know, the narrative watching the news, but they certainly can understand and see people on ventilators. They can see people marching in the street wearing masks. They can see people protesting. They can see people being, you know, building body bags, et cetera, et cetera. So I would be very, very concerned about exposing individuals with ID to too much negative visual television. Again, they won't understand what's going on, but they are intuitive and they know when they see things that scare them, irritate them, or provide some anxiety. So just be very, very prudent in not exposing them to too much.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good advice for all of us, taking a break. Jody, our friend from Hawaii, has asked, can you mention snoozaloon therapy as being effective? Question mark.
Well, yeah, at my agency, we do have a multisensory environment team that basically is run by our occupational therapists. And the literature is pretty robust on the relaxation techniques and the sensory reinforcement that snoozalin. Snoozalin, by the way, is a proprietary name for equipment that can change the threshold of somebody's sensory overloading through their choice and control of lights and textures and environment and aromatherapy and music therapy, etc. It could be very, very fortifying. That being said, one of the flaws and misunderstandings of employing snoozalin or multisensory environment is to ensure that you do not overload their senses as well. Overloading and overexciting somebody can be just as deleterious as understimulating them.
Please, you can mute yourself. I don't think you want us to hear your environment. I had the opportunity years ago in Holland to see one of the first. That's where it comes from, the Dutch. My concern is that people think it's all or nothing and don't realize it should be a choice and used individual by individual. I've often seen rooms designed there. It's all at once, all the sensory information. Kind of reminds me when I used to take the kids to Chuck E. Cheese, birthday parties of just total overload.
Absolutely, it's a therapeutic modality, and basically it has to be exploited, and basically it has to be fortified by knowledgeable people. It's not just plug it in and turn it on.
Yeah. Comment from Lucy, iPads being used to keep up communications with their friends. Even when they can't speak, they seem to enjoy seeing their peers. Yes. Absolutely. Comment from Marari, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Similarly occurred here in Florida with an increase of behaviors due to a change of routine. Our residential providers and direct care supports who were able to think outside the box to maintain the clients engaged with different activities within the group homes.
Yeah, once again, it all relies and falls down on the DSP. Very often working alone in isolation with little preparation and little training, especially during a crisis. Yeah, and possibly not able to go home to their families, possibly having to stay isolated from their families. Yeah, it is. Lucy, love the making of their own mass idea. I'm going to steal that. Frank, sorry, I'll have to sign off now. Enjoyed the presentation and the discussion. Catherine Hughes, we say we're not scared because we are prepared. That affirmation seems to be coming. Annie, yes, I agree with more telehealth and webinar trainings in the future. And Marianne, thanks, I will do. And that is the last comment that I see there. Any last, and I'll just bring it together with what next week's presentation will be. So any last comments, Rick, you'd like to make? No, I certainly want to thank everybody who's participating, and I look forward to hearing about their experiences and their comments, their insights, because we are an ever-changing organization, and we like to beg, borrow, and steal better ideas than we have here. So please share your thoughts and your visions with us. Comment, this webinar gave me some great ideas for presenting information on dementia and COVID-19. Thank you very much. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Stay safe, everyone. Truly enjoy the presentation. Have a good evening. Thank you. Very informative. Okay. Yes, thank you. And let me, actually, Patty's not presenting next week. Hers is June 9th, Rick. Oh, okay, great. We had to change it around because I'm complex.
May 19th, which is next week, and we will be doing this 5 weeks in a row, is the role of ethics in medical decision-making with Jean Kerwin. And I'm just thrilled with the people who will be presenting this, including Dr. Rader, who really is in high demand these days and had to really work to schedule around to be able to be with us tonight. So we can't thank enough everyone, and including our presenters like Dr. Rick Rader. Wonderful presentation, and that's the comments that keep coming through, Rick, is wonderful
Great.
presentation.
My pleasure.
Our pleasure too, an honor for me to be on with all of you, for all of you who've taken the time to be with us tonight. We look forward to when we're together next week, same time, 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. So please, everyone, stay safe and healthy, and do take some quiet time away from the news and from all of the challenges and the crisis we have around us, to be still and to have moments of peace. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy. And I just had, is this a 4 or 5 week session? This one is a 5-week session. Our last session is June 9th. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye now.
Bye.